Hello, and welcome to DSR's Words Matter. I'm David Rothkopf, and I'm joined this week, as every week, by the ebullient, optimistic, little Mary Sunshine, um, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. I don't know, something like that. Norm Ornstein. How are you today, Norm?
About the same as usual, David.
About the same. Did you spend any time today at the White House website looking at their timeline of major events about renovations? Did you see what they did?
I have not. Tell me.
Oh my God. So what they did, because they're sort of underwater
Yeah.
on because they tore down the East Wing and they're building this ridiculous thing that nobody wants them to build, is they're trying to defend it, and they've put on their website, and you're really going to see this. They put on their website, uh, you know, uh, what you know might expect, which is pictures of past renovations to show other people have done this. Although this one is the biggest by far, and it hasn't gone through any procedures. But included in their timeline of major events, just to give you a sense of how they do. They go addition of the North Portico, addition of the West Wing, addition of the Oval Office, and so forth. Addition of the briefing room. The next is Bill Clinton scandal. The next is Muslim Brotherhood visit, and there's a picture of Obama wearing a turban. And then next is tennis pavilion. Then next is cocaine discovered, and there's a picture of Hunter Biden naked in the bathtub with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Then Trans Day of Visibility. Then North and South flagpoles, Rose Garden renovations. It's like they're so disgusting they cannot help themselves, and so they just throw this stuff in gratuitously, um, because they want to distract people from the fact that they're building a 300 million. They've torn down the East Wing. They're building a $300 million ballroom for billionaires while SNAP funding is running out.
There are a few things here. Of course, one is that every previous renovation, and they started by talking about Teddy Roosevelt's huge renovation, which occurred because the building was unsafe and was falling down. Then they point to all things, but the reality is every single previous change in the White House went through a legal process, going through historic preservation and zoning issues, and this one did not. Not to mention, I regularly use what Mary McCarthy said about Lillian Hellman for almost everybody in this administration. Every word out of fill in your blank's mouth, including a and the, is a lie. And remember when Donald Trump said, we're going to do this, but we aren't going to touch the building. I love the building, and said it repeatedly. And then, without telling anybody, tears down the entire East Wing and then has the Secret Service block public spaces so that nobody can take a photograph of what they're doing. Then you take a look at the model, and what they have is this monstrosity that will dwarf the White House while removing all kinds of offices. I'm surprised that Melania Trump, since the First Lady has traditionally had offices in the East Wing, has not, I'm not surprised, has not said anything.
She doesn't live there.
No.
She,
Then yeah, that's true. She probably never visited. Then you have the Office of Legislative Affairs, which of course they don't care about because they don't care about the legislature. Uh, all of this is so astonishing. But the part that is not getting enough attention to me, on top of all of that, David, is the lick-spittle corporations throwing money at Trump, including the now, I would have to say, vile Jeff Bezos, who had Amazon contribute to this. with Trump saying one of his buddies gave $131 million, but he isn't going to tell us who. And my response to that was, has he already gotten the pardon or is he just waiting for it? Um, the level, the idea that the people's house has become an extension of Mar-a-Lago, which is no doubt going to have the same sort of dictator gilded uh, excess that will be an embarrassment to good taste or any taste at all in the country. And that's not even the biggest story of the week. God help us.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, in some ways it is the biggest story of the week, not because, it, per se is, it's everything that you said. It. I actually wrote my column, which will be up in a little bit at the Daily Beast about this, um, because it's, vulgar and unnecessary and so forth. And it's 90,000 square feet. The rest of the White House is 55,000 square feet. It's, as you say, going to be completely um, grotesque and frankly, I can't see future presidents using it because it'll have such a stigma attached to it. But this issue you touch on, which is the corruption involved with it, where people are paying him off because they expect something in return, um, is, I mean, as I say in the article, it's one of the reasons it's the perfect monument to Trump because it's founded on corruption and he is in fact profoundly corrupt. But something else has happened this week, which because so many things are happening, people don't notice. But did you see that just as a manifestation of all of this, that the owners of Discovery Time Warner have put it up for sale,
Yep.
and several organizations, Apple and some others, but including Paramount, Skydance, have made a play for it. And this is, by the way, it's CNN and HBO and some other things. And Trump yesterday said, "I want Skydance essentially to be the buyers. Anybody else who buys this will face regulatory scrutiny." I mean, it's just like, and which is, Ellison, and it's, some of these other guys who are Trump cronies. And so essentially he's sticking his hand into the marketplace and saying, these guys win or else. It's mafia economics. And it's the way we do everything now.
It's stunning, and I have little doubt that Brendan Carr, another one of his lickspittles, the chair of the FCC, will step in and issue his threats as well. And let's remember that we're not just talking about David Ellison and Larry Ellison, his father, right-wing nuts who are in Trump's pocket, buying CNN on top of CBS and buying HBO. They are also going to be a part of the team that Trump has engineered illegally to buy a controlling interest in TikTok. So we have Mark Zuckerberg, who embarrassed himself by something we've talked about before when Trump had all of the tech billionaires to a meal and they bowed and scraped in front of him. Mark Zuckerberg, sitting next to him, announced, "Mr. President, Meta, Facebook, will invest $600 billion in the US in the next 4 years." And then when the mic was off and he didn't realize it was still a hot mic, leaned over to Trump and said, "Was that a good number? I just made it up. I hope you like it." And you have Bezos. So you've got almost all of the major communications outlets controlled by Trump lickspittles. And it's what you see in every dictatorship, just as the ballroom fits what previous dictators have done, trying to look like Louis XIV and Versailles. And, unfortunately, they're not likely to suffer the same fate as Louis XIV.
Uh, yeah. Um, Unfortunately, I guess. But well, Louis the XIV lived out his life. Louis the XVI that came to a bad end in the French Revolution. But revolutions happen. I don't know what these guys are thinking. I, they're sort of placing all their bets, like they're sort of counting on this being a 1,000-year Reich, just to pick a
Yeah.
term, and the reality is, it probably won't be. As even though they try to sort of tip the scales and do this gerrymandering, whatever, at some point or another, public opinion, which ultimately drives these things, um, is going to get so anti that there'll be a different leadership. And these people are all going to be seen as collaborators. They're all going to be seen as kind of Vichy Americans. And I can't imagine that there won't be consequences for making these kind of bets. But maybe you think I'm naive.
Well, let's circle back to the ballroom. Federal law makes it a crime to destroy federal property. Um, Here's where the Supreme Court, with its outrageous and unconstitutional immunity decision, basically has let Trump get away with it, because he can argue plausibly that blowing up the East Wing was an official act. So he is immune. At the same time, you can be sure that if somehow we go through all of this and Trump is still there, and in 2029, we inaugurate a different president from a different party, who, in theory, with a Congress, but especially a president, would start to go after some of these outrageously illegal actions, we're going to see a level of pardoning done by autopen unlike anything we have seen before. Trump is going to pardon every single one of his cronies who have committed illegal acts, starting with Tom Homan, going to Pete Hegseth, going to everyone in his cabinet, to Stephen Miller, to everybody in the White House. And it puzzles me at this point, after this pardon for pay of an evil man who was accused of basically laundering money for the worst terrorist organizations, because he participated in Trump's crypto scheme to the tune of many, many millions of dollars. Why do we not have a Democrat, at least, who has introduced a constitutional amendment to curb the notion of pardons for pay? It just, that Democrats are not going on the offensive over any of this stuff, that they don't have their billionaires putting up ads all over the place on every medium that we still have the ability to access, to point out the outrages, and letting them basically dominate their own media blitz, is beyond me.
Well, it gets to a bigger issue. I was involved in a conversation earlier in the week, and people were saying, "Well, we have to, what do we have to do to restore democracy and so on and so forth." And somebody smart on the call said something, not me. Somebody smart on the call said something telling, which is, we talk about democracy and democratic institutions and so forth, but what really drives all these things is sort of the power structure of the country. you know who writes the checks, who's got the money, who's got above the institutions, particularly given the way our system works with campaign finance and all these other things. There is a separate power structure that isn't the government power structure, and almost universally people in that power structure have chosen not to stand up to Trump or to go along with Trump. And this is what happened in Germany in the 1930s, and it's happened in a lot of other countries. But it's really appalling. By the way, Ed Luce has a essay in the Financial Times this weekend, which looks at this. And he went out to a lot of people to talk about Trump's retribution and intimidation and the consequences of it all. And he spoke to many, many people I know because I talked to him about it. And most of them won't even talk on the record. Most people are afraid. He talks about people in the Obama administration or Biden administration not being able to get jobs. Um, People who, lawyers who represent people who are targets not being able to get work. That everybody is afraid that there is going to be an economic price to pay for running afoul of Trump. And this is where the system is broken down. And unless there is a shift in that, all the rest of it follows that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I could not agree more. I think what we have is a combination of greedy traders, business leaders, financial leaders who believe that by giving in to Trump, throwing a little bit of money at him, they're going to get not just better tax rates, better ability to hold on to their grifted money through the abolishment of inheritance taxes, less regulation, but also more favors and cowards, people who are frightened for their lives, for their livelihoods, or for their businesses. And what we've seen is the unprecedented takeover of all of the powerful avenues of government that can be used to destroy people's lives, including a Justice Department that can break bogus charges, but that force people to put everything aside and spend a great deal of money simply to remove those bogus charges, uh, along with cult members. And here we can circle back to the fact that with none of this, whether it's a pardon of a horrible individual for huge sums of money, an attempt to shake down his own government for $230 million, which is against the Constitution and the law, saying that he was hurt by the prosecutions, and then they're going after all of the prosecutors.
By the way, saying that the decision on whether to release the money to him is actually his decision.
Yeah. And then you have the illegal murders on both the high seas and in nation's own waters of fishermen. And the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, Jim Rich, says he's not going to hold any hearings on this. The willingness of Republicans in Congress to turn a blind eye to give up all of their own power here. And I'll just mention one other small example. Paul Krugman mentioned in one of his recent Substacks that Iowa gets 60 some percent of its energy from solar. Iowa, right? Trump is devastating solar, not only taking away subsidies, but putting huge additional costs on anybody trying to do, excuse me, not solar, wind. I got to get my facts straight. 60 some percent from wind. He trashes wind at every opportunity. You have Chuck Grassley, Joni Ernst, Marion, whatever Meeks, all of these Republicans in Iowa saying not word one as he devastates their energy capacity. The level of obsequiousness, of obeisance, of lickspittleness, choose whatever term you want, by every Republican in Congress turning their backs on their own states, their own constituents, on decency, to kowtow to this thug boggles the mind.
We're going to have to come up with a lick spittle drinking game here because
Yeah.
people would be on the floor at this point with your but no, but it's true. And and the thing is, there's so many different instances of it. Another one from this week is that Trump has said, I mean, in addition to the fact that we don't have money for food aid. We don't have money for health subsidies. We do have money for billionaire ballrooms. Uh,
Argentina, don't
well,
forget
that's what that's where I
40,000,000,000.
was going. That's where I was
Sorry,
going.
I didn't mean to
But
step on your punchline.
well, but that's okay. But we do have 40 billion for Argentina, and then for some reason, which is like, even though he's given him 40 billion, Trump has said to Milei, his buddy, who's a complete friggin' lunatic. Trump has said to Milei that who's the head of Argentina, that we'll buy their beef, that we're going to bring in Argentine beef without tariffs and things. So American beef farm. This is just another example of red state Americans getting completely screwed by the president. And we can give 100 others, because they're going to shut the rural hospitals. They're ending education programs. They're et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, not a peep, not a peep. It's and it's. I mean, this is our problem. I mean, it really, you can say the problem is Democrats. Sure. Although I was pleased to see, just as I logged on to this, that Hakeem Jeffries has finally, 4 months too late, decided he's going to endorse Zoran Mamdani, which is like, wow, really showing a lot of spine there. But I mean, we can blame Democrats for this and that. But I gotta say, it's the CEOs, it's the people that run the media organizations, it's the head of the law firms, it's the academics, it's the people who have real power in this country who are showing complete spinelessness that I think has made this situation as bad as it is.
Yeah, I'll mention one other example of another group, which is our intrepid journalists. We have Steve Bannon saying yesterday he's going to have a third term. Uh, and I've seen a number of journalists respond to that by saying, "Oh, come on, so old at that point," without mentioning that it is flatly unconstitutional. Steve Bannon is floating, basically hijacking the Constitution, and the press coverage is about a horse race for an unconstitutional president trying to subvert the 22nd Amendment. And that's, it's all of the outrages that we've been talking about are mostly treated as routine stuff. It's, again, normalizing the abnormal. There are a few exceptions to that. I'll give kudos to the New York Times, which has at least taken up some of these issues, including the White House, the right way. But as a general matter, forget about it.
Yeah, although I would say that Justice Sotomayor was quoted publicly saying, when asked about this third term thing, saying that in the Constitution, that it's against the letter of the Constitution, but nobody has tested it in court. In other words, there are a lot of things that, there's an emoluments clause in the Constitution that,
Two of them.
yeah, two, right, domestic and international, and doesn't that they don't matter. Um, this court is very selective about what aspects of the Constitution it chooses to enforce.
I saw another interview with Amy Coney Barrett. This one done, as I recall, by Ross Douthat in the New York Times, and it chilled me because basically Barrett, who is doing all kinds of interviews, mostly with right wing and far right wing outlets. Uh, Again, the one who appeared with her protector, Mitch McConnell, at his institute and said, "We're not a bunch of partisan hacks." And she's the number one partisan hack. But what chilled me was this. She basically said, we can't worry about people criticizing us or about our own reputation. We're making decisions. It was almost like what Gorsuch had said with the immunity decision, for the ages. It doesn't matter what the short-term implications are. And she used as an example Brown v. Board of Education, unpopular with the segregationists, as the example, but it stood the test of time, right? So, in effect, she was legitimizing the notion of giving Trump dictatorial powers, knowing that he is using them for utterly malign ends and trying to create a permanent dictatorship, and basically justifying actions and votes in the Supreme Court to allow that to happen. And that's chilling, because I think that's their rationale for giving a green light to almost everything. And let's note, David, that we have a Supreme Court decision coming up about the use of the military and the National Guard, even against what governors want, in the face of utter lies about devastation, whether it's Portland or San Francisco or Chicago. And if this court, as I think is most likely, basically says nobody can question a president's judgment. If he says it's an emergency, it's an emergency. He can do anything he wants. And if that's the case, the 2026 midterm elections are going to be faced with American troops on the ground all across the country, trying to intimidate voters and change the election outcomes, and probably seizing ballot boxes, all saying there's an emergency caused by voter fraud. And we're going to be in a heap of trouble. And Amy Coney Barrett will sleep well at night despite destroying American democracy.
Yeah, I throw in the towel. I can't take it anymore. I mean, you're just listing all these things. I just read Ed's article. I just wrote something on this damn um, memorial to Trump. This destruction of the White House and all this corruption and stuff. Can't take it. So we have like 5 minutes left. Please tell me something positive. Just something that you've seen that gives you a glimmer of hope.
Um, the Toronto Blue Jays making it to the World Series.
That gives you hope.
Uh, I'm grasping at very small straws here, David. By the way, I will say one other thing that came to mind. It's not that it gives me hope, but it made me feel a little bit better. Was I wanted to resurrect the term from Bonfires of the Vanities, short-fingered vulgarian.
So
Um,
that short-fingered vulgarian, credit where it is due, goes to Kurt Anderson and Spy
I'm sorry.
Magazine.
My mistake. My mistake. I do not want to. Spy Magazine, which regularly treated me to its satire, or treated its satire by hitting me. Kurt Anderson deserves the credit, and I have to take that back.
Yeah,
And I,
and he remains a short-fingered vulgarian. And
well,
this thing that
short
he's
something else as well.
well, oh God. Oh my God. So, but people want to know, like, is this government shutdown, will it go on forever?
Um, it will not go on forever. What I will say is, I still think Democrats will benefit from this, even if there will be some public turning on them for this reason. Democrats have, I think, firmly pointed out that if there are no changes in the law, millions, tens of millions of Americans are going to face increases in their health care premiums of 3 or 4-fold, and make it unaffordable for them, or destroy their lives and their budgets.
That's
And
right.
what they've done is to make it clear who is responsible, and that is Donald Trump and the Republicans. And I think at some point they're going to have to reinstate those subsidies, and it may happen sooner rather than later. I've seen at least a couple of reports, true or not, that many Republicans, at least in the Senate, behind the scenes, are starting to get nervous, and maybe will put out a compromise, which is extend the subsidies, even if they do it for 6 months or for a year. If I were the Democrats, I would jump at that. I'd love to have this brought up again in 6 months or even more approaching the November elections and have them treat it this way again. So maybe we're seeing, at least with the spine that Senate Democrats have shown, not caving yet on the shutdown, that they're and not trying to ameliorate the impact of it, that they're finally doing a short bit of the right thing. And kudos, by the way, to Jeff Merkley, who's one of my favorite senators, for doing 22 hours on the Senate floor, even if it didn't get a huge amount of attention, at least trying to create some showcase for the behavior of the charlatans who run the Senate.
See, never let it be said that you don't have an optimistic bone in your body.
Yes, yes.
You found something positive on which we could end. And I, hope that when we get back next week, we can find more. I hope everybody will join us back here next week. Join us at all the other things we're doing here at the DSR network. When you talk about favorite members of Congress, we did a good conversation yesterday with Ted Lieu,
Great guy.
representative from California, about just what's going on, but also about AI. He's got a degree in computer science. He actually understands this stuff. It's really good. So we've got a lot of good stuff here. Go to the dsrnetwork.com, listen to it, become a member, support us. If you're at YouTube, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, wherever you are. And join Norm and I here again next week for more Words Matter. Thanks, Norm. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, David, and thank to our listeners and viewers.